Okay, well, I've got 12:11, so I think that we should go ahead and get started here. Welcome back, everybody. We are ready for week 3. Just a quick word before we get into our lesson for today. I apologize for being so behind on grading. I know you all are submitting these assignments, and I'm just now starting to get in and take a look at them. I apologize for that. So I'll be working on your class's work today and tomorrow. Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have everything caught up again. All right, let's clean out the waiting room. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And get us started here. Okay. All right. So today we're going to continue working on Unit 1. We're looking at the 3 different colonial regions. Last time we focused on their economies and how people living there made a living, what they did to survive and to thrive in those colonies. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the culture in each one of the regions, what their social life and political lives were like. So here's our agenda for today. We will do a quick warm-up to practice the historical thinking skill of sourcing. And then we'll do a quick review on mercantilism and the 3 colonial regions. You'll need a piece of paper and a pencil for this section. So if you need to find a piece of paper and a pencil, this would be a good time to do that. Then we'll walk through your class notes. These are already in Canvas, but there's some things I want to highlight for you. And then I'll introduce to you our activity for today about democracy in colonial America. All right, so here's our warm-up today. It looks very similar to the warm-up we had last time, but I want to be sure that we understand this important point about sourcing. So here's my question for you. I'm going to put a poll up on the screen. And if you take a look at this painting, which is on the right here, it's called The Residence of David Twining. And it was painted by Edward Hicks in 1887. So my question for you is, would this painting help historians understand the economic development in the mid-Atlantic colonies before 1750? Okay, and so my question is, do you agree with this statement that it would be helpful, this painting would help historians? Or no, do you disagree and say, no, this painting would not help a historian? Okay, about 80% of you have voted. Make sure you get your vote in. When we do polls like this, this is how you're showing me that you are here, even though your camera is off, right? That you are here and listening and engaged in what we're doing. Need a couple more of you to put your votes in. Last 5 seconds. Okay, so here is our results. 73%, so 3/4 of you disagreed and said that this painting would not be helpful. 27% of you said yes, it would be. Would somebody who selected disagree and said it would not be helpful, would you share with everybody why you chose that answer? Just unmute your microphone and share with us.
It was pretty much the same reason as last time, because Edward Hicks in 1887 probably wasn't around in 1750, which is the time that's depicted.
Okay, thank you, Richard. You're right. We know that the artist who painted this, who was that?
Michael.
Michael, thank you. Sorry, I don't know why. There it is. Got it. Thank you, Michael. I apologize. We know that the artist could not have been alive at the time, right, if he painted this in 1887. So what else can we conclude about why it would not be helpful? What are some other points that would make that answer stronger? Okay, let me ask it this way. Is this painting a primary or a secondary source?
Secondary.
Secondary, okay. And the reason we know it's not primary is because of what Michael told us, right? That the artist could not have been an eyewitness to this period in history because of the large time gap, right? So it's not a primary source. The artist was not an eyewitness. We don't know anything about the artist, right? We don't have any information here in this little description of who the artist is or whether he's done any research. We don't know even if the picture that he drew, if you look at it closely here, we have no idea what colony this is, right? It could be the southern region for all we know. We don't really know much about it. So I think the 75% of you that keyed in on that, great. Remember, those of you who agree, we don't have enough information in the source to be able to determine whether it would be reliable. And the only information we have, the date of the painting, suggests that if we're looking for what happened over 130 years before, this painting is probably not going to be our best source, okay? Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions? Okay, our numbers are definitely better than they were last week, so we're getting there. Today we're working on the same two learning targets as last class. We're looking at economic differences between each colonial region, and we're going to add into that today social and political differences and how they created unique cultures between the three colonial regions. So if you remember last time, we looked at the 13 colonies that grew under British rule. That's okay, Luca, don't worry about it. And we divided those 13 colonies into three groups based upon what they had in common, right? We named those three regions New England. Those are the four colonies furthest north. And then the Mid-Atlantic region, the four colonies sort of in the middle, right? And then the southern colonies are the five furthest south along the Atlantic coast. From there, we looked at lots of different images and pictures and maps to make some characteristics about each of the regions. We looked at their geography and their climate and tried to understand how those factors, something the colonists themselves could not control, right? How those factors influenced the way their economies developed. We saw in New England that because they couldn't do a lot of farming, they had long cold winters and a short growing season and very rocky soil. they had small family farms to grow food that they would use as a family, right? But we didn't see large mass production of agriculture in New England like we did in the other regions. So instead, New Englanders turned to fishing and whaling. They use their natural resource of trees to cut down trees and use those for lumber to build ships. Lumber was a huge export back to England. And of course, they had a lot of trade and shipping from their coastal cities, such as Boston. The Mid-Atlantic region had a much more moderate climate, kind of in the middle. Better growing season. The soil was very rich and fertile, and so agriculture did well here. This region becomes known as the breadbasket, right? Kind of a symbolic idea that it's where all the wheat and other grains are grown. And so this is the region that is feeding the other two regions. They had other economic activities as well. They were the most diverse of the three regions. And they had some manufacturing, there were paper mills, metalworks, those types of things. We also see in New York City and Philadelphia a lot of trade and shipping as well. The southern region had a different climate, very hot and humid. And while it had a long growing season, not all crops do very well with that type of climate. So instead of seeing wheat and grains, we see a different kind of crop begin to emerge and be successful here. And these are cash crops, right? Things like tobacco and cotton that are grown not to eat, but to sell and make money. The South had fewer large cities. There were fewer people in general living in the South. And because of that, both that idea that there were fewer people to begin with, and the fact that these large cash crops or these large farms growing cash crops needed people to work, the South fairly quickly became reliant on others for labor. We see both enslaved persons and indentured servants working in the South. We'll talk more about that on Thursday. So underneath this economy in the colonial regions was this system called mercantilism. We mentioned this last time about how this was used by the European colonial powers, England and France and Spain, to create this system of interdependence between the mother country, the European country, and its colonies. I want you to take out your piece of paper that I had you find and just put 3 numbers on it. A number 1, skip a couple lines, and a number 2, and a number 3. Okay, does everyone have their paper ready?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Now, I've put on the screen a picture, actually 3 pictures, that represent 3 key ideas of what mercantilism is all about. And underneath each picture, you'll see a number, right? And those match back to the numbers on your paper. So for each picture, I want you to write for me what you think that picture represents as a piece of this idea of mercantilism. So look at each picture and write down what you think it means with regard to this economic system. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about that and write it down. Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I saw something happen there. Okay, just to make sure you understand what we're doing, you have a piece of paper with 3 numbers, right? Just one number for each picture. And what I want you to do is try to guess what the picture symbolizes as an important component of mercantilism. What is the picture trying to show? So we're thinking of mercantilism, as the caption here suggests, from the European point of view. So from England's point of view, what are some key components or parts of this idea, this economic system of mercantilism? We'll go about 30 more seconds and then come back together. Okay, well, I'm interested to see what you think. Let's take the first picture, number 1. Who'd like to share for us what they wrote? What do you think this first picture represents as an important part of mercantilism? Anybody want to take a chance here? Unmute your microphone and...
The mother country keeps all the profit that the colonies make.
Okay. And who was that? Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So if we look at the first picture, that's a treasure chest, right? And filled in the treasure chest, it's overflowing with gold and silver. So one of the key ideas with mercantilism is for the mother country to get rich, right? And take the profits and the natural resources coming from those colonies to make it stronger, wealthier, more power, right? Okay, good. That's the first one. What about the second image? What is that showing?
I had said that the second one was saying that the mother country used the colonies to gain important resources, and that's why it's like more exports from the colonies.
Okay. I agree with you, Thomas, but I think you've got it actually reversed. Okay. So when you look at the scales, they want to have a balance of trade, they meaning the European country, right? Where it is sending out more exports than it's importing. Do you guys see that? So when these countries are manufacturing goods, they want to be able to sell them, right? So they're exporting them out to the colonies. You want to be sending out more than you have to buy to bring in. Does that make sense? Because that way you're spending less to buy goods and you're making more money by selling more. So in other words, when you look at your balance of trade, how many goods are going out versus how many goods do you have to bring in, you want your balance of trade to reflect more exports, because that way you're selling more goods.
All right, yeah, that sounds well. Thank you.
Okay. All right, who wants to take a look at the third one? What do all those circles mean? What's happening in that picture? They are connected. It's like a big cycle. Thank you, Eamon. How are they connected? What's the relationship? Yes. Okay. So let's just, if we look at the picture, let's kind of talk it through here. If we start with the mother country, right, that's England. And so out of the circle here, if we follow it across, England is sending out manufactured goods. That's the exports, right? You want to export your products and sell them abroad. From the colonies, what are the colonies sending back to the mother country? All those raw materials, right? The gold and silver, fur, lumber, food. We can think of things like fish or wheat. All of those natural resources are coming back from the colonies to the mother country. Okay, so we have this circle of trade, manufactured goods going to the colonies, natural resources coming back to the mother country. But here's the critical piece. Do you see the arrows going from the colonies to any other country? No, there's no other circle, right? Everything they send goes back to the mother country. One of the most important features of mercantilism is that the mother countries controlled very strictly who the colonies could trade with. So there were strict rules in place that required the American colonies only to trade with Great Britain. Even if the French or the Spanish would offer them a better price for their tobacco or their lumber, they could not trade with any other country. England wanted all of those benefits to stay with England, right? Okay, good. Any questions on those images? So 3 key components, just to make sure we've got it. This is all in your notes in the Canvas module. But just to make sure that we understand, right? The first one is to make the mother country wealthy, right? Second one is to make sure that The balance of trade is favorable, meaning we're exporting more than we have to bring in. And third, that the mother country strictly controls the trade and that it's getting back all of the raw materials from the colonies, and the mother country can sell back manufactured goods. So we see this circle of trade. Okay, that's a lot of economics for today. Any questions about that? Okay, good. So I'm going to review with you just briefly your class notes that are in Canvas. If you haven't read through these yet, I would suggest that you do that today. So everything I'm going to show you here is in your notes. There's just a couple of things I wanted to highlight for you. We're going to look at two aspects in both colonial regions, or two aspects in all three regions. We're going to look at the social life and the political life, okay? So if we start in the north, in New England, colonial society there is based on religion, right? We know from the very beginning with Plymouth that New England is all about religion. It is the center of their lives and the center of their community. The Puritans that lived in New England were very intolerant of people who didn't agree with them. They only wanted the true believers, so to speak, in their colonies, and they persecuted those who disagreed with them. Those people were called dissenters. They dissented from the view. When you think about it, this is pretty ironic for the Pilgrims, right, who came to the New World seeking freedom of religion and freedom to worship. It seems ironic that they would not allow others to have that same freedom, right? But they were convinced that their way was the true way, the correct way, and they didn't want others who dissented from that belief in their community. So as a result, we see other colonies founded in New England after Massachusetts. In New England, the towns were generally pretty small, and right in the center of the town was a church, or a meeting house, I should say, and that meeting house served many purposes. One, of course, was as a church, and the other was to hold town meetings. When we talked about Plymouth, we mentioned the Mayflower Compact, how right away, the very beginning, they recognized the need for self-government and rules. And so we see as a tradition in New England, these town meetings develop. And there, I put in your notes here that it's a type of Athenian direct democracy, right? Where the citizens of the town themselves make their own laws. And of course, in this time, that would have been white males, right? No women were involved in making laws or rules for the colony. And also people of color, of course. There were many fewer in New England, but they would not have been allowed to participate either. So we see very early on in New England this self-government tradition. If we come down the coast into the Mid-Atlantic region, we talked last week about how diverse the different peoples were who lived there. They came from many different parts of Europe, not just England. And when they traveled here, they brought their religious views with them. And so in in the Mid-Atlantic, we see a lot more tolerance for different views. Everybody, you just do what you want to do in the Mid-Atlantic, and everybody sort of tolerated that. Because of that, we see the social structure much more flexible. There's not so much a sense of those who are in charge of the church control everything, right? It's different. Along with the diverse economy, we see the different religions, and because of that, we start seeing people from all different aspects of life rise up in local governments and also in business. So very flexible social structure, not tied to any one particular aspect. Because of that, the Mid-Atlantic's political life is really focused on the individual towns where people live and trade their goods. We see local governments develop with democratic principles. So again, we start to see some of that small self-government spread across the Mid-Atlantic region. Now, the southern region, as you can imagine, is very different, and their social structure is built much more around the ownership of land. Large farms, agriculture, that's where the power is in the South. And so who your family is and whether your family owns land reflects your social status. The large landowners retained very close ties with Great Britain. That's their trading partners, right? If they're raising tobacco and cotton, their main customer is going to be Great Britain. And so because of those economic ties, most Southerners stayed very closely aligned with Britain from a cultural perspective. Many of them followed the Anglican faith, that was the Church of England. And so we see a very strong tie to Great Britain continue in the South. The political life in the South is very different than the other two regions, and that's mostly because there are so fewer people. You know, in a New England town, you can walk to the meeting house in the center of the town and have your church or have your town meeting. But in the South, because people live so far apart, the farms are very large, and you may not have your nearest neighbor but 5 miles away. So you really don't have the local government like you would in a little town or in a small village in New England. In the South, politics and civic life become organized by counties, very large areas of land. For example, Prince William is a county, right? And it stretches all the way from the Potomac River to I-66. That's a long way. That's a big county. And so the men who were landowners in that county, they would have played a leading role in the state or the colonial legislature. And so those were the power players. They were the ones who were able to make laws and address those issues. Okay, so any questions about the three regions? Everybody still with me? All right, we're almost to your part again, so hang on, we're almost there. One last thing, though, I want to briefly mention to you is that while we've talked about the three colonial regions being different and having different characteristics, there is one event that united all 13 colonies before the American Revolution, and that event is called the Great Awakening. This is a period of time, a movement in history that we see both in Europe and in the colonies. And it's, as the name suggests, it's sort of a reawakening of the importance in religion in people's lives. And what happens is, instead of necessarily the church telling people how to have a relationship with God, these newfangled preachers and ministers tell people that they can have their own personal relationship with God. They don't need the church to be able to do that. And that kind of idea is very revolutionary, and it challenges this whole establishment of churches and governments and kind of creates this new sense of, well, wait a minute, maybe we're really all equal. If the priest has no more control or no more importance in the eyes of God than I do, then we're really all equal. And so we start seeing this awakening, this new sense that everybody is accountable for their actions, right? And that we're all equal, even the king. The king is no better than us. before God. We're all equal, and he should be held to the same standards and same accountability as we are. We also start to see, growing out of the Great Awakening, a realization that the idea here of slavery is wrong. It is contrary to what the Bible teaches. And we start seeing people freeing their slaves and a greater support for ending slavery, particularly in the North, where it isn't as widespread or important for their economy. So we get this sense from this movement that America has sort of a special duty or a spiritual duty to take this message of democracy, where people are involved in their government, in freedom across the globe, and begin to stand for individual rights and liberties against a monarch, against a government who is violating those rights. These ideas really lay sort of a foundation for the next few decades when the colonists begin to take a stand against Great Britain and ask for their own independence. I've put a page in your Canvas module that gives you a little bit more background about the Great Awakening, and also a video to watch, just to give you a little bit more that you can look for on your own, rather than spending time to do that when we're all together. Okay, so I have 4 questions for you, just to make sure, number 1, that you're still with me here, and number 2, that we understand what I've been talking about. So here's your first question. I'm going to play another round of Name That Region. So take a look at the question and then choose your answer. Make sure that you're entering your vote. This is how you're telling me that you are here and you're listening and engaged with our lesson. Okay, last 5 seconds. Get your vote in. Okay, here are the results. Very good. 79% of you correctly chose the Mid-Atlantic region. Okay, let's do the next one. Here we go. Which region? Okay, 10 seconds to get your vote in. Okay, here are the results. Very good. New England was the correct answer for that one. All right, here's the third one. Which region? Place your vote. Okay, last 10 seconds. Get it in. Excellent. Good. All right. And that was a pretty easy one, I think. 96% of you correctly chose the southern region. All right. And so here is the last one. This one's ridiculously easy, right? What's the name of the religious movement? Hang on, let me launch it. There we go. What's the name of the religious movement that challenged established religious and governmental order? Okay, half of you have voted. Rest of you get your votes in. %75 of you get your vote in. All right, very good. So here's our results. Yes, the correct answer here is the Great Awakening. It's as if they are awakened, right, to a new sense of religion and a relationship with God. Excellent. So I'm going to stop sharing results if I can find my cursor. There we go. And close that. Okay, so for the rest of our time together, I'm going to let you go into Canvas and work on a document-based activity. Pretty simple, I think, but let me walk you through the directions so you'll understand what it is I'm asking you to do. We're going to look at how democratic the colonies were. We've talked about ideas of self-government, but I want to really think about whether or not we can describe the colonies as a whole as democratic. Now, first of all, what does democracy mean? What is a democratic government? A democracy is where the people choose. The people have the power, right? The people exercise that power by voting. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a vote. And those votes are what decides what the government will do, right? So everybody is participating. When we think about democracy in colonial America, when the colonists are so far away from the king and from the British government, we would think there would be lots of opportunities for democracy, right? Where they would set their own rules and laws. And certainly we've seen that. We saw that very early on, both in Jamestown with the House of Burgesses and the Mayflower Compact with the Pilgrims. But from there, when we look at the entire context of what's happening in the American colonies, were they really democratic? When we think about a democracy, things that show us we have a democracy, these are the types of things you're looking for, right? Do all adult citizens have the right to participate in their government? They have the power to choose their leaders. We see an idea of majority rule, right? Whoever has the most votes wins. That's democracy. But we also see a protection for the minorities' rights, that even if you're not the party in charge of your government, right, that you still have individual rights and liberties that are protected. In a democracy, all citizens have equal rights. They're treated fairly and the same under the law. And all levels of government are accessible to the people. You can contact your leaders. You can write to them. You can communicate with them. You can open up their door and go visit them, right? So the question, just to remind you, that we're going to look at is how democratic were the colonies? When I turn you loose here to go into Canvas, you're going to go into your Unit 1 module, and you'll see what we worked on here last week. Here's the new page about the Great Awakening to take a look at. And then the assignment for you is this one here, Democracy in Colonial America, Document-Based Activity. So when you click on that, this will open, and you'll see the directions. that are basically what we just talked through on the slides. And I have for you here the definition of a democracy and what the characteristics or examples of a democracy are. So you have that to refer back to. And here is the assignment. I have two things for you to look at, a timeline and a page with some images on it, some sources. And as you're looking through those resources, I want you to find at least 5 examples that show colonial America was democratic and 5 sources that show it was not democratic. Okay? And then once you have found those, there's a chart here for you to write them on, and then we'll answer the question. Based on what you find, what's your answer? What do you think? How democratic was colonial America? So let's take a look at those documents. When you open up the timeline and the sources, you'll have 2 pages. One is a page of pictures with a description, and the other is a timeline of events. And if we focus in on those first 2 pictures, take a look at these first 2 images. Read those captions for me. Do we see in those images an example that would support democracy in the colonies? Anybody want to unmute their microphone and share? Do we see an example of democracy in either of these sources?
No, because women didn't get the same rights as men did.
Okay, so we definitely see an example of them not being democratic, right? In the picture on the right, we see an image of a colonial woman working with a spinning wheel, right, taking care of a young child here. And the source tells us that women could not vote or hold public office. So certainly that's an example of not having democracy. They'd be undemocratic, right?
Yeah,
But
then
what
the
about-
picture on the left says that only men who own property could vote. So that's
Okay.
not democracy.
Okay, so it is limiting the rights of men to participate. Okay. But what about the idea that in general, the property owners of the town are making the decisions for how their town will run? Could we argue that's an element of democracy? Maybe. I think you could. But I think hopefully you've got a sense of what I'm asking you to do with these sources, right? So you're looking for examples. Here's the timeline, just to take a look at that. Do we see an example from the timeline of democracy?
The 1639 Fundamental Orders of Connecticut says the first constitution in the colonies that established a system of government run by the citizens. That's it.
Very good. Okay, excellent. So that would be an example of democracy in the colonies. Do we see an example here of something undemocratic in the colonies? But we take a look at this one, 1624, the Virginia company that establishes Jamestown is replaced And now we have a colonial governor appointed by the king, so the king gets to choose, that will monitor the colony. All right, so are the colonists now in charge of Virginia? No, right? So that would be an example of something that is an undemocratic characteristic. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I think so. I hope so. So the second document in that assignment is your chart where you're going to actually put this information. Okay, so when you open it up, it will look like this. And across the top, once you open it, click Enable Editing. You'll be able to put your cursor right in here. And I want you to give me 5 democratic characteristics that you find in those sources and 5 undemocratic characteristics. Wait a minute, go back. So for example, we could write here the point about the Constitution in Connecticut, right, that allowed the government to be run by its citizens. On the undemocratic side, we could write how women were not allowed to hold public office. Only men who owned property in New England could vote, those types of things. So just make sure that you have 5 on each side. There's plenty more examples in the sources, but you only have to have 5. And then at the bottom of the page, I want you to answer the question. How democratic was colonial America? What do you think? When you look at the whole picture, what is your conclusion? There's no right answer here. There's just your answer. So choose a side and defend it. What is your evidence that supports your conclusion? Then once you have your chart filled out and you're ready to submit the assignment, you just click on the blue Submit Assignment button there, and then scroll down to the bottom of your page. I have a rubric in here just to remind you of how to earn all the possible points. Make sure you've got your chart filled out completely. And then choose your file from wherever you saved it and click Submit. And that will magically send it to me in Canvas, and I will have it to be able to grade. Okay. So for the rest of our time together, we've got just about 20 minutes left. Go into Canvas, make sure that you can open up and access this assignment. Take a look at your class notes and the Great Awakening page. There's a reading there and a video for you. And just a reminder that our summative assessment for Unit 1 will be next week on Tuesday. All right, does anybody have any questions before we end our time together? Okay, well, I will stay here. You're welcome to stay on the call if you wish, or you can always jump back in the link in our course. Have a great day, everybody, and I will see you on Thursday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everybody. Sure. Yes. Maybe. Yes. Yes. What you're going to do is look at the 2 previous documents. The page that has all of the sources on it, the pictures, and then the other page that is a timeline. And when you read through both pages, you're looking for examples of what would be a democratic characteristic and what would not be democratic. So then on the chart, you're going to list those examples. What are things that show the colonies were democratic? What are some things that show they were not democratic? Okay. Well, I guess it depends on the particular piece of evidence. Okay. So, like, for example, if you chose, oh, that's the wrong way. Sorry. Let's do this. If you chose this image about the woman and you said that women could not vote or hold public office, that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, sure. Sure. Did he seem okay? Okay. Well, I think it should be, I should have checked it. I forgot that, but it's right from YouTube, and I think it had closed captions on it. Okay. All right. It's not very long. I'd say it's maybe 5 minutes. It's not very. Okay. All right. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Kathy. Okay. Bye.